Hurry Up Tomorrow is The Weeknd's latest adventure into acting and hopefully his last. Hurry Up Tomorrow, starring The Weeknd, made me wish for the work week. Hurry Up Tomorrow is what I spent the duration of this film wishing for. Hurry Up Tomorrow, because why live in the present if the present is watching The Weeknd attempt to act again? Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Eric, if you didn't know, and 1 year ago, when Jennifer Lopez released her This Is Me movie and documentary, we made fun of her. She had a terrible idea for a vanity project, funded it herself because no one wanted to risk $30 million on a celebrity people mostly love to hate, and the result was a glorious mess. Out of touch, ego-driven, and quite frankly, funny. A harmless little project that put a smile on all of our faces. A project that, in my opinion, belongs in the Hall of Fame of cinematic art prowess. And now, with The Weeknd's latest film, Hurry Up Tomorrow, a similar concept, I thought we should give it the same treatment. Touted as a companion piece to The Weeknd's 2025 album of the same name, Hurry Up Tomorrow follows a fictionalized version of Abel Tesfaye as he struggles with depression and insomnia and is pulled into an existential odyssey by a mysterious fan. He started working on the story, allegedly following a 2022 event where he lost his voice on stage. And after watching the film, I am both confused and fascinated. Now, the first time I watched it, I got to the end and thought, wait, is that it? Like, that's the story? There's nothing else? I could summarize this entire film in like 2 minutes. It's 1 hour and 45 minutes long, and surprisingly, very, very little happens throughout. The movie gives meaning to this could have been an email, or this could have been a 5-minute long music video. You know, think about Beyonce and Lady Gaga's Telephone. Has a little intro, has a little outro, has some sort of a narrative, and it's a visual spectacle. But instead, we got nearly 2 hours of conceptualized visuals that lack a compelling narrative. On one hand, it's Abel Tesfaye's evolving artistic journey as he struggles with his public persona, The Weeknd, which has now become an enabler of his addiction and self-destructive behavior. But on the other hand, it's a pretentious, self-aggrandizing mess that forgot to do what it was trying to do in trying to do what it wanted to do. Does that make sense? And if you're a diehard fan of The Weeknd, you will find a way to defend this mess, but if you're just a common mortal like me who knows The Weeknd in passing, has heard a few of his songs but doesn't know the lore behind it, well, rest assured, I'm here to explain what this vanity project means. If Jennifer Lopez was trying to tell us how she found true love, how she let it go years ago and is now working her way back, The Weeknd is telling us he's done. The Weeknd is done, no more, he's gonna die. Like the persona, not the person. I did go on the internet to do some research. I had no idea of all of this lore and the meanings behind it, but if you need to do a deep dive into Reddit forums to understand a film, then maybe you're not doing enough to convey the message. That's just a thought. I'm gonna explain it all, so spoiler alert, of course, but don't worry, you know, this really could have been an email, and if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe down below, and leave a comment. Support the channel. Support the stutterers of the world, me included. I do have a stutter, that's why it's Stutterbox and not Chatterbox. Get it? That was a play on words, I'm so smart. Okay, this is Hurry Up Tomorrow. So as I said, the film features a fictionalized version of Abel Tesfaye, the real name of The Weeknd. Now, this project does have some sort of idol aura to it, like the visuals, the vibes, the synth music playing in the background nonstop. It comes from his album. So this is like a glorified listening experience where you get some sort of a narrative thrown in haphazardly. And honestly, if you watch this movie on mute, you wouldn't miss much. Abel Tesfaye's acting, I'm afraid, hasn't gotten better, but it's also not the worst. Like, there are fleeting moments, mostly when he's quiet, morosely looking into the void, that I think, okay, this could be a real actor. But then he goes ahead and speaks. And this is where he loses the audience, because I don't think he has the acting panache to deliver simple lines in simple situations. And I say that as a non-professional non-actor. Thank you. But given that his best moments are when he's quiet, staring into nothingness, I wonder if the merit should be attributed to the makeup department rather than The Weeknd. One thing the movie does that is really annoying, and it feels like they're trying to push the runtime, is there are endless long silent sequences with nothing but background synth music playing. And it's a lot. It's quite long. Right from the beginning, you're like staring at his face for a minute or two while he does vocal exercises in front of the mirror, that kind of stuff. So the movie starts and he's on tour. He's doing his performances. The movie counts with two other actors with speaking lines. We have Barry Keoghan, decorated actor. He's got a few Oscar nominations, I think. He's a good actor. And you've got Jenna Ortega, a global phenomenon who's also a very decorated actress who's been killing it in the acting game until she goes and does shit like this or Miller's Game. I want to know, who are these agents speaking to that they shove Barry Keoghan and Jenna Ortega in this project? Because up until now, I hadn't seen truly a bad performance from either of these two actors, but watching this, I'm like, damn. Did everyone just skip acting classes altogether? It's like a weird combination of a bad script and mumblecore. Now, mumblecore, if you're not familiar, is when movies portray realistic dialogue. A lot of the actors do improvising and ad-libbing, and that usually makes it to the final cut. And this is like a weird mix between the two, but the parts that you can tell are scripted come across as so wooden and stiff, but also bad. Like, the writing is bad, which is honestly surprising because the writer and director of this film is Trey Edward Schultz. He's known for the psychological horror It Comes at Night, which was a really good film, but it was also co-written by Abel Tesfaye and his writing partner Reza Fahim, and you can tell that there's influences from The Weeknd and Fahim in this film because, again, it's impossible to escape the similarities between the visuals in this film and the visuals of The Idol. But don't worry, it's not as problematic and as bad as The Idol, but it does have some sort of room to grow. A lot of room to grow, in fact. If anything, this movie can only grow to be better because it's difficult to make this worse. You could cut out all the dialogue. You'd cut out about half an hour of the film. You'd release it straight to YouTube, and it'd be a sensation of visual spectacles accompanied by his music. But no, instead we have a film that was theatrically released. And I'm wondering, why was Jennifer Lopez's not released theatrically? I'm seeing both movies and I'm thinking Jennifer Lopez's has a more cinematic appeal, like a wider cinematic release appeal. If anything, this is my apology video to Jennifer Lopez. Sorry, girl, I truly did not understand your initial vision, but now, in hindsight, it's like, you know what, I get it. I get what she was doing, and I commend her for it. As annoying as the film was, I get it. Hurry Up Tomorrow, I don't get. But it's also not for me to get because I'm not a Weeknd fan. I'm speaking strictly as a fan of cinema, the art of filmmaking, if you will. So there's two narratives happening. On one hand, The Weeknd is going on stage to perform, and on the other, we see Jenna Ortega's character. Her name is Anima. We're gonna call her Annie. And we see her burn a house before jumping into a car looking flustered, and she drives to The Weeknd's concert. Jenna Ortega was hired for this film for two things: looking distressed and crying on screen. And boy, oh boy, does she deliver very little on both. She does a good job. Maybe it's the fact that everything else around doesn't make sense and doesn't pull you in. I'm gonna be straight up. It was boring. Like, the movie was boring. I zoned out a few times. I had to go back several times to re-listen to the dialogue because I thought these lines might be important, but then I realized I had to do research to understand them. So honestly, skip it all together. And then we have Barry Keoghan playing Lee, Abel's manager. He's like the enabler of The Weeknd's party life. And it's pretty clear that The Weeknd's life is basically go on stage, perform, and then go party with a bunch of women and a bunch of drugs. And Lee doesn't seem too upset about it. In fact, he's probably living vicariously through The Weeknd. He's from a small town in Ireland, And this is when the dots started connecting, which will lead me to the explanation at the end of the video, but bear with. The Weeknd is clearly struggling with stress. We hear a voice note of a presumed ex-girlfriend who tells him that he's a terrible person and that he doesn't love her, because when you love someone, you wouldn't do to someone what he did to her. We never get any backstory into it. I guess that if you know The Weeknd's lore, this may be related to some sort of relationship that he had in the past that ended badly. But all of the stress and the insomnia and the partying and the drinking and the drugs cause some voice issues. He goes to the doctor and they tell him that even though it's not nodes, it's like something that happens in your voice that you're unable to basically sing. And he suggests The Weeknd take as much rest as possible, because if he keeps singing, it might get worse. But all in all, it's in his mind. It's all a psychological problem. And once again, we get these confusing visuals like this, for example. I don't get what we're seeing. There's buildings, it's a city. This lasts for so long, like it's still going, right? And in the background it's just like synth music. They get to their next venue, and The Weeknd is heavily struggling. He then refuses to go on stage because, again, he's not able to sing and he wants to rest. But Lee, the manager, is like, yeah, he's the enabler. So much so that he gives him a pep talk. The pep talk is just like someone adoring their cult leader. He tells him that he's not even human, that he needs to go. He's like a superhero. He also tells The Weeknd that he saved him from a small town in Ireland, has transformed his life completely, has allowed him to live this dream of touring with his best friend and just having fun and making great money. And all of this, along with a bump of coke, is enough to convince The Weeknd to go on stage and sing. And this is the first time that Abel sees Annie. He sees her in the audience, and he's visibly struggling. Again, all of these scenes take so fucking long. It's very slow. Like, we're already almost halfway through the movie and still nothing of substance has happened other than long wallowing silences of The Weeknd looking sad into nothingness or holding his phone or listening to the voice message. But in the middle of the concert, Abel's voice completely fails. He goes silent and he exits stage in a rush, panicked. He locks himself in his changing room, and Annie, seeing Abel escape the stage, decides to jump the fence and somehow ends up backstage as well. This is the security nowhere to be seen. And as she's running from a security guard who saw her, she runs into Abel. They bump into each other. Little to no conversation happens before he invites her to go with him, and she accepts because she seems to be a super fan of The Weeknd. So they go on a drive, they drive around, they go to a hotel, they're talking, they go to an arcade, they play games. It takes about like 10 minutes of them just hanging out, not really saying much. They don't have much dialogue. It's just a camera on them following them around, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, there's no story happening. A movie needs a story. But The Weeknd is living a normal night, I guess, with Annie, this girl that he just met backstage, and yeah, we're supposed to just go along with it. They make their way back to a hotel room, and this is where some character development happens. He plays the song that he's writing to Annie. It's not complete, but it brings Annie to tears. She then tells him that she feels like this is about her, and explains how her father abandoned her when she was younger, and her mom had to raise her on her own, but eventually she felt like she needed to leave her mom to start living her life, so she left home, which presumably is what the burning the house meant. Hey, when I leave the house, I walk out the front door. Annie burns the place to the ground. Be more like Annie. Be a radical anarchist who just wants to set fire to things. Also, fire is that cleansing thing that, rising from the ashes and all that shit. So a lot of metaphorical meanings at play here. And this small conversation really brings them close together, like very close. They just hug endlessly, and then we get this long ass shot of them just very close to each other. Again, the visuals in the film are good. Some of them are really beautiful. Others, they're okay. but there's not enough substance behind the visuals to tie one sequence to the next. A lot of the endings are abrupt, and I understand that they're trying to do like a hard stop on a certain visual story to start another, but nothing connects all of this. It just feels thrown together at the wall, see what sticks and what doesn't, and then just released. And then the day after a beautiful night of connecting and talking about their inner demons, Abel is very cold. He's completely zoned out of whatever interaction he had with Annie. He's more focused on getting back on tour now that he's had some time to, think about things and whatever. And Annie's not having it. She's pissed. They have a little argument, and it gives Abel the chance to act his ass off.
What are you doing? What the are you doing? I have to go right now. I'm getting calls. I have to catch a flight.
Yo, this is so this was the clip that went viral when the movie came out in cinemas, and I was like, this is bad. This is really bad. A small part of me wants them to lean into this ridiculous, like his inability to act, his inability to deliver these lines properly. They should lean into that, and they should make this like a campy mess. But instead, they do this so earnestly, and I understand why. This is obviously a very personal project for Abel. But dude, come on. It's you know what it is? It's pretentious art. It's like those artsy kids who glue a used tissue on a wall and then say, this represents my experiences because it has my snot that came from inside my body, and my body holds the combination of experiences that has shaped me into the person that I am today. This is art. This is me. Take it or leave it. And I'm like, I want to leave it. I want to leave the planet right now if this is what art is. Okay? But Annie's pissed off, so she knocks him out with a bottle of champagne. And then we see a long dream sequence of the Weeknd walking around in an empty hotel lobby, empty streets. He ends up in a tunnel where there's seemingly a zombie or a monster, and there's no explanation as to what this is. I guess he's tripping. This is him going through it. And he runs out of the tunnel, and he ends up at this, I don't know if it's a beach or a mountain, but there's a kid, presumably his younger self, watching the fire as he sings one of his songs in his native language of Amharic. Yeah. Then he wakes up in the hotel, and he's tied up. Annie has tied him up, and you even see that the frame of the film, like the filming style changes. They use 3 different types. Which was it? 35 mil, 16 mil, and Super 8 film. So like the frame rate changes in certain scenes. I don't really know why. I didn't look into it enough to see if like any of the types of film used were being used on like real life, dream sequences, whatever it is, but the frame rate changes. Annie is looking at him, and it reminded me of Misery. Isn't the woman in Misery also called Annie? Anyway, she's got him tied up, and she's like, I'm not going to let you continue doing this self-destructive behavior of yours. I'm here to put a stop to it. And then for the next 5 to 10 minutes, it's just Jenna Ortega playing songs of his 2 previous albums and dancing like a lunatic in the bedroom. I want to know how much she got paid for this. I bet this was the easiest money she's ever done, especially if she's a fan of The Weeknd's music. Look at that. She's getting paid just to jump around in a hotel room and dance on top of The Weeknd like a maniac. She's analyzing the lyrics of the songs and talking to The Weeknd like this one is just a fun song that you listen at the club and you're dancing and all of that. And then this one is about the toxicity of said relationship. It's not good for you. It feels like The Weeknd is analyzing his own music and telling us what each of the songs meant. I personally prefer when musicians put out music and they let us interpret it, but this movie's telling us that these 2 previous albums and now his 3rd, Hurry Up Tomorrow, are like a trilogy, right? Trilogy of this persona, The Weeknd, I guess. And Annie wants to save him from it. Unfortunately, the party is interrupted by Lee. Remember Lee, Barry Keoghan, he's back. He's looking for The Weeknd because he just left the stadium without saying anything to anyone. And there's a little altercation between Lee and Annie that ultimately ends with Annie stabbing Lee in the neck with a piece of broken glass. Lee falls to the floor, bleeding to death, and Annie joins The Weeknd in bed so she can sob into his chest all while he is gagged. Basically, all Annie wants is for Abel to be honest with himself. And when he doesn't, she douses him in gasoline, just like she doused the house at the beginning of the film with gasoline. She's about to burn him to a crisp. But before she can set him on fire, he gives us an a cappella performance that lasts about, I don't know, 2-3 minutes.
Who else has to pay for my sin?
He's got a good voice. Listen, I like The Weeknd's voice, and in fact, I like it when a singer has a distinctly different voice when they sing from when they talk, kind of like Christina Aguilera. I think The Weeknd has that. His singing voice is quite different than his speaking voice, but it was a lot. It was a long sequence. It was a lot of a cappella, and not every singer can do a cappella. Nope. Not every singer, but he does, and that stops Annie in her tracks. She doesn't burn him after all, and instead, she releases him. Well, we see her untie him, and then the bed is burning, and then The Weeknd leaves the hotel room, walks down the hallway, which leads directly into the backstage of his next concert. He looks at himself in the mirror, and the movie ends. And that was Hurry Up Tomorrow. Now, first time watching this, I'm like, really? That's it? Like, you what? What does any of this mean? Like, hello. But then I did some digging, and I think I cracked the code. So, The Weeknd was abandoned by his father when he was a little kid, and he was raised by his mom and his grandmom, I think. So, this film, grandmom? Grandmother. Grandma. So, this film is like a semi autobiographical telling of his struggles, which started in 2022 when he lost his voice on stage. But they're also indicative of the end of the Weeknd persona, or at least the end of this trilogy of albums that he put out recently, which were After Hours in 2020, Dawn FM in 2022, and Hurry Up Tomorrow now in 2025. So this is like the end of an era. But looking at the characters, so we got Annie. Annie, I think, represents young Abel Tesfaye before he rose to stardom, the innocent version that wants to start a life independent of his childhood traumas of being abandoned by his father and only being raised by a single mom, which are exactly the struggles that Annie is facing in this film. She's escaping her mom, and she was left by her dad when she was younger. And then Lee represents the actual persona or the worlds in which The Weeknd is a superstar. Lee is that motor that pushes him to keep performing and to keep pushing himself past his voice limits. And he's also the enabler, the one that takes The Weeknd to parties and gives him drugs and eggs him on to do drugs and do more performances and continue to live this reckless, self-destructive life that Abel has been living as The Weeknd. Also, there's a quick reference in the film where Lee tells Abel, you know, you tried acting, it didn't work out. And that was a direct reference to the idol, You Can't Tell Me Otherwise. But considering Annie as the young Abel Tesfaye and Lee as the Weeknd persona, I think is the only way to make this film make sense. Then you realize that the character of Annie isn't actually real. He made her up in his mind, and she was basically the illusion that tethered him to his childhood life. When he hit his breaking point with insomnia and drug use and exhaustion, he defaulted to that, I guess, innocent version of himself, trying to pull him back from this reckless behavior, from this reckless path that will likely end up with him probably dead. My only question is, why is Annie a girl, right? Like, that's the only thing that's not really computing in my mind. Like, why is Abel representing his past life, his innocent version, through Annie? Why not, I don't know, a young man? So there's this duality between Annie and Lee where they're both trying to pull Abel in different directions, and Abel is trying to cope with all of this unaddressed trauma in his childhood, his abandonment issues, and how he wishes that hadn't happened, but also how that turned him into an evil person, because this breakup that he seemingly had with this female character that we never see on screen is alluded to have been messy and the result of his reckless behavior. So it's his fault. He failed. And he recognizes that he's the problem and that he's out of control and that he needs saving. Hence the character Annie that threatens to burn him alive unless he's honest. And he accepts his fate, accepts the death of this artistic persona he's created the Weeknd. Whereas Lee represents the party boy in him that wants to keep living this lavish life of superstardom. The fact that he's from a small town in Ireland and he says that Abel saved him from that life and he transformed his life and allowed him to live his dreams is like, yeah, this persona, the Weeknd, is what allowed Abel Tesfaye to jump into the limelight, into the spotlight, to become a global phenomenon, and to have the career that he's had. So the Weeknd as a persona, though it was important, isn't anymore. In fact, it's this toxic aspect of Abel Tesfaye's life that he's potentially trying to let go. So in the end, when we see him do his a cappella version of his song on Hurry Up Tomorrow, and then we see the bedroom burning, it's basically him accepting the end of this era. The era of party boy, drug addict, cheating individual potentially. So when we see him do his a cappella performance in bed and then the bedroom burning, that's basically him allowing the fire to cleanse his soul, accepting the end of this era of the Weeknd and ushering in a new era, which is when he walks down the hallway and emerges in the backstage area and he looks at himself. I think, listen, may not make a lot of sense, but you know, I'm doing as best as I can with what I was given. And understanding all of this and seeing how this Odyssey was actually all in his mind and it was him reckoning with what he's feeling on the inside and what to do next as an artist, I think there was a better way to tell the story. I think that there was a better narrative to be built in order to convey this message. I also think, again, this could have been an email or a longer music video. I don't think this movie justifies itself. I don't think that his intentions are enough to justify a film that was released in cinemas. If he had cut the acting narrative where we have Jen Ortega and Barry Keoghan and him like talking to each other and creating this fictionalized version of Abel, and instead had a visual masterpiece that speaks through the visuals and just, you know, plays the song in the background and we listen to the lyrics, we see the visuals, and we kind of understand where the story's going. You don't have to... This is the thing. The movie does a weird job of spoon-feeding us information, but then not feeding enough that we get it unless we know all the lore behind the Weeknd. But is that enough to justify this film? I don't think so. I don't know. It doesn't land. It just feels like a vanity project where he wanted to explain this era before he ended it. So he wants to give us the explanation and he wants to tell us why, even though no one asked. I didn't. I don't think anyone has. And in the end, we're just left like empty. There's something missing. There's a substance to the story that we didn't get. And that's why I think it was so disappointing to get to the end and realize that there's really nothing else. And the whole time that we spent watching these endless sequences in silence, again, the synth music playing in the background, but what are we doing here? It's just like incoherent, disjointed, messy combinations of sequences and visuals that lack soul, I guess. There's not much behind the visual prowess of seeing like all of these colors interact and all of these angles and cool camera shots. There's nothing beyond that. And that's sad. And that's why, Jennifer Lopez, you did what you had to do and we just weren't ready for it. So my apologies. Never hated you, but also I don't hate The Weeknd. You know, they're both cool people because they both donated to Palestinian children. And honestly, at this point, it's more than we can ask because everyone has lost their mind. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to leave it a like down below, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment. Help the family grow. Bring the stutterers in. I haven't seen many stuttering subscribers, so if you are out there and if you have a stutter, please speak up. This is your moment. This is your space. I support you. We all support you. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, stay stupid, and stay stuttering. Bye, guys.